Good evening.
Hi.
Okay, one more time. Good evening. There it is. Welcome to Planet Word. My name is Britt Oates, Manager of Public Programs, and we are so excited to welcome you to tonight's programming event. As part of our Eyes on Reading series, this is Lessons Learned, reporting on reading and dyslexia, moderated by host of the award-winning podcast Sold a Story and Planet Word's journalist in residence, Emily Hanford, who will be joined tonight by her special guest, staff writer for The New Yorker, Mr. David Owen. Today's program will include a discussion between Emily and David, followed by a brief audience Q&A. And now, please join me in welcoming the incomparable Emily Hanford.
Thank you, Britt. Thank you all for coming. I first started reporting on literacy about a decade ago. And as some of you may know, it started with college students who were telling me how difficult reading and writing were for them. And that made me realize how much I had been taking those skills for granted. Reading and writing are so central to my life, and I'd never really stopped to think about what it takes to learn how to read and write. I can tell you, standing here nearly 10 years later, that there is a lot to think about when it comes to how people learn to read and write. And tonight's guest is someone who, like me, makes his living as a writer, and recently he too turned his attention to the question of how people learn to read. David Owen has been a staff writer for The New Yorker since 1991. Before that, he worked for The Atlantic and for Harper's. He writes about a lot of different things, a wide range of topics. Golf is one of them. And I admit that I have not read any of his articles about golf. I'm sorry. I have read many of his other articles in The New Yorker. One of my favorites is a piece that he wrote years ago for The New Yorker. And it's about the way a certain smell can suddenly evoke a memory. What he wrote was this: certain smells go all the way down to the core of memory, and encountering them again can set off reverberations. Now, this happens to me all the time. It's kind of a family joke, actually, that mom is having one of her scent memories again. I kind of get made fun of. But David described my experience so precisely and evocatively. And that is what great writers can do. They can put an experience into words so clearly, and you suddenly recognize it as your own. We invited David to Planet Word for this Eyes on Reading series because in December, he wrote an article for The New Yorker called Dyslexia and the Reading Wars. He interviewed me for that article, which I considered my Christmas gift to my mother, who is here tonight, because she reads every issue of The New Yorker cover to cover, and there I was, inside The New Yorker. So David is here tonight as a fellow journalist who became interested in how people learn to read and decided to write about it. And he quickly discovered, as I did, that almost everyone has some personal connection to this issue. They have a child or a niece or a nephew or a parent or their own story about reading difficulty. And when a writer puts words to that experience, that particular experience, a lot of people recognize themselves. So please welcome to the stage, David Owen.
Thank you.
Welcome. So we have some slides here. We have a little show and tell.
I should apologize to your mother first for quoting you saying a bad word in The New Yorker. But
oh, I know. When the fact checker called me and read my quote, I was wondering if I could ask for that to be taken out. But as a fellow journalist, I was like, well, that would be a pain if I had you change the quote. But then you told me later that I could have asked for it to be taken out.
And it's such a bad word, I can't even say what it was.
He can't, he's so bashful. I blame it on being from Massachusetts, where that particular F word is like a spice for many of our sentences. So it comes out of my mouth when it really shouldn't. So anyway, it's just emphasis. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about being a writer first. So, in becoming a writer. So, why are you a writer? Or like, when and how did you become one? Where does it begin?
I think I pretty much always wanted to be a writer. For a while, I wanted to be a secret agent. I wanted to build a mini sub. I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to do various things. Then when I was in 6th grade, I decided I wanted to be a poet. And then also sort of also wanted to be a journalist, editing school newspapers and things like that. And when I got a little older, I realized that was sort of concerned to see that all the contemporary poets that I admired seemed to be mentally ill. And and I thought, I consoled myself by thinking, well, maybe I'll become mentally ill at a later date. But eventually...
You'd have more to write about, maybe.
Yeah, it seemed it's almost like a part of the job description.
Yeah.
But then I sort of drifted entirely into journalism and got interested in that, decided I didn't want to teach. I had one experience of teaching, and I was a terrible teacher. I didn't really know how to grade people, and I had my grade list. I thought, there are too many B's in a row, and so I would add a plus and add a minus. But it was just
those are bad grades now too. Like
I know.
Complaints for that.
They were okay then. But so I don't. But journalism has let me write, and I've been able to. I know a little bit about a lot of things. I've written about a lot of different things, as you know. I've always thought that the ideal college major for me would have been to take the introductory course in every department, and because I love the first year I loved in economics and philosophy, and then I would take the next one, and this is terrible. This is nothing like what 101 was. So I ended up as an English major. But
you knew in 6th grade that you wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
But why? Why did you know that?
It just felt like just something that I really had to do, poetry and those things. But then anything, and I think I would be happy writing angry letters to the editor, as you know.
Well, you can retire and do that.
Right, exactly. If there are letters to the editor anymore. But
well, here's you. This is your.
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
This is high school newspaper. That's me over there.
Oh, see, I guess that was you, actually. That's interesting.
No, that's a classmate.
Okay.
Back when there were typewriters.
Yeah.
Manual typewriters.
All right. Yeah, and then we have this one. What's this?
This is in college. I went to 2 colleges. I started at Colorado College. I'm in the striped sweater, and nobody wanted to be the editor of the paper, so I ended up as the editor of the paper the second semester of my freshman year.
Ah.
And my roommate, by the end of the year, was the head of the president of the student body. So we must have really been unpleasant to be around. And he's now a Trump-appointed federal judge in Tennessee. So anyway.
Interesting. Yeah, I always felt like I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer, but when I look back now, I'm like, oh, well, you wanted to be a writer. Because we used to play newspaper and school. Mm-hmm. Those are the two. And I was the teacher, and I was the newspaper editor. I was also the oldest.
Right.
I was also the bus driver when we played bus, but I didn't end up as a bus driver. But I always thought the real journalists were the people who worked on their high school and college newspapers, which I didn't, because I didn't know that I really wanted to be a journalist. And I always felt when I was a journalist, I was like, well, I'm surrounded by all these people who worked on their college newspapers. And I didn't.
And I loved it. It was it's a great extracurricular activity, except that it wasn't really extracurricular because I didn't do anything in any of my classes. All I wanted to do was be on the paper and literary magazines too. And so it was really fun. And I met my wife. We were working on a college humor magazine, and
right.
So it's like it was like vocational training, basically,
right.
All those things.
Okay, so then how does your journalism career begin?
I was a fact checker at New York Magazine for 6 months and couldn't stand it because we were paid. It was during the big newspaper strike in New York City in the late 70s. And so New York Magazine was as thick as Vogue. It was like this because all the newspapers none of them were printing. And there were only 3 of us checking the facts, and it was agony. And we were paid nothing. It was $160 a week, and no overtime or anything like that. So I quit, and I just sort of tried to be a freelance writer, and I did some little projects. I wrote the text for a book about cats, and then I had this idea that I would go back to. I would pretend to be a high school student and go back to high school and infiltrate a high school, and I did it.
Yes,
So
you did. This is his first
I just
book.
I just went to my to the reunion of this class.
So what we're looking at is the cover of your first book called High School Undercover with the Class of 80.
Yep. I went for 4 months. It was much. Now you'd be arrested for it, and you should. I mean, no one should do this. But my agent posed as my mother. She was 38, I think. My actual mother was I could tell she was jealous of her. And I made a false birth certificate, and I had to get a transcript from the high school I'd actually attended in Kansas City, and so I printed up fake stationery and a fake transcript and a fake envelope, and I sent it to my mother and asked her to mail it from Kansas City. And I knew the registrar at the high school I'd gone to, and my mother asked her when they got the request from the high school for my transcript just to throw it away. So when she did that, and then mine came, and nobody was really looking for kids trying to drop into high school. And I was nervous at first, but then I went for a semester, and I took my wife to a dance, and it almost ended our marriage. I was commuting from New York to Stratford, Connecticut, which is where this high school was. It was like an hour and 40 minutes.
And so every day you were driving to school?
Taking the train. I would get up. I would take the subway take the train to Bridgeport. I guess maybe it went to Stratford, and it was nice. I read on the train. But anyway, I took her to a dance, and for her, it was like walking. She didn't have a lot of great memories of high school, and walking into a gym where a dance was going on, it was like just like having a drug flashback. Her whole adolescence just hit her,
and so she had to pretend to be a high school senior as well.
Yeah, she did, but she thought it was going to be fun, but it immediately wasn't. I tried to put my arm around. She didn't want to dance. I tried to put my arm around her. I hit her in the. So anyway, we left, and then we had to wait for the train, and then we had this long train ride back to New York, and it was touch and go.
Were you actually married yet?
Yeah, we were married.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were married. I was a married high school senior.
Wow. And did anyone come close to like finding you out?
No, nobody suspected me, and they didn't find out. Later, after the book came out, like a year later, it takes a long time for a book to come out. There was a kid who was working in a local bookstore, and he was reading it, and he recognized something. I changed everything, but he recognized something, and he showed it to his journalism teacher, who had been my journalism teacher, and she recognized the picture on the back of the jacket. So then then I was found out, and then the principal was angry at first, but then the superintendent of schools said the book was not meant to be a critique of the school, but just because it accurately described it, it was. And anyway, he said, your book says things that I've been saying for years. So he took my wife and me out to lunch in New York at like 11 o'clock in the morning at the Magic Pan, which is like exactly where a superintendent of schools would take you to lunch. He was incredibly kind, and then he invited us to. We saw a production of Othello at the Stratford, Connecticut Shakespeare Theater,
Wow.
and it was it was famous people. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look, but it was real. It was a real production, and I just went to the reunion, and about the expected number of members of the class are dead. The guy who was the super athlete and the heartthrob, he died like 10 years ago.
Oh dear.
But I didn't recognize anybody. They were more
remembered
likely
you?
to remember me
because
when the book came out, I was discovered. I was still people could still remember me, but I hadn't seen any of them since then. So Barry Manilow optioned the film and music rights to the book. And
but it didn't
luckily never did it.
Was he going to play you?
I think he was. I think it was going to be a musical.
Wow. High School the Musical.
Nothing ever.
Doesn't that exist?
Nothing ever happened.
Okay, so now I want to start getting. So Do you remember anything when you were pretending to be a senior in high school? Did you notice anything about kids who were really struggling? Were you paying attention to that part of it?
Well, it was. I tried to struggle myself. I didn't want to.
Give it away.
I didn't want to stand out. I tried to make C's, and sometimes it was hard. I suddenly understood algebra, which I had not.
Oh.
But there, it was a pretty working class high school, and there were not a lot of kids who were into high school, and the teachers were not that good. So, but no, it was. But what I do know, from working on this, I think back to my own high school, and I think, I think about kids who. It's what everyone knows. Oh, that kid that everybody thought was dumb. He had trouble reading.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you remember about learning how to read as a child?
We had in first grade. My teacher said we called her Mrs. Polar Bear. She had glasses that said "look." It said L-O-O. Her eyes were the O's, and it was very look-say. She had flashcards with words on them, and there was
Here are the books that you used.
Alice and Jerry.
Yeah, these were the Alice and Jerry books. So here's one of the pages from the books, which is kind of like Look Say on steroids.
Right.
It says, "Look, mother, see the little," and there's just a picture of a lamb, sheep, something.
Yeah, a
donkey.
Little donkey.
Don't know what
donkey.
It is.
You see, look at the picture. That's how you're supposed to read.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Of course, donkey.
Right.
See the little cart, wagon, could be either.
Yeah, and the little.
Here comes the
little
man,
guy,
farmer.
And I think this is the covers. The covers on the previous slide. Those are the books that we had when I was in first grade in 1961. These were because I remember that I thought, oh, that's so cool, that adhesive tape down the edge. I think the page inside is from the original edition, which is like from the 1930s. So it's a little more. But it was the same thing. It was like Dick and Jane, lots of repetition, and they helped with the first ones helped with the words that you didn't know yet.
Yeah.
With
But learning to read was not difficult for you.
I don't remember it as having been difficult.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of it for me, and I've talked about that before, that I just took it for granted, and my own experience learning to read, I barely remember it, and my kids,
this is
pretty
exactly
easy.
what Margaret and what Margaret Goldberg said, the wonderful person that you connected me with, who was
also here on stage with us recently.
I believe it. But she was great, and she said she had some trouble learning to read herself. But she said when she talks to teachers, she asks them how they learned to read, and they answer, well, it was incredibly easy for me. And she thinks that, I'm sure it's true. And I know it was easy for my kids, especially for my daughter. And if she had been the only person my only sample of people learning to read, I would have thought all you have to do is take your kids to the library, get lots of books, get them in a bag, and then one day they can they'll be able to read.
Mm-hmm. Here we have this is a book. Well, tell us what this is.
I don't know if anybody reads these still. It was Miriam Cohen. These are wonderful series of books about first graders, about a class of first graders, and each one has his or her own personality. But this is called When Will I Read? And I thought back to this. I thought, I went and looked it up again, and it's what she says here. It will happen. The teacher smiled. Then she went to get the snacks. There's nothing. By the end of the book, Jim suddenly knows how to read. There's never any suggestion in the book that you have to teach anybody to read. Mm-hmm. You will read when you are ready. There's no instruction. She's written some words on signs, and I think this is the problem, basically.
Well, and look at the little boy in the picture.
Yeah,
you will read, but
the books are wonderful, but this is so much. And she in the acknowledgments right in the front, or the dedication, it's dedicated to two people who I assume are professors of education. It's Dr. somebody and something. So it's meant to reflect the best thinking in 1977 about how you teach people to read. And when you think 1977 is 22 years after Why Johnny Can't Read. It's amazing that this was in 1977, anybody was still thinking this way about teaching kids to read.
But they were. These are, what do we see here?
These are two of my grandchildren. We're going for a walk. They would agree to go only if they could take books with them. So.
See, and you see that this runs in families, like.
It's whatever. There's a genetic element, and there's something there, and I remember when my daughter started to read, and I think she had her little brother was, I think he was only 2, and I thought, we've just invented perpetual motion. She can read to him. And so like we'd be in the car and she would be reading him. I was like, we're done. We don't have to do anything anymore.
Mm-hmm. So when did you first encounter a different take on it all? Like when did you first realize, oh, it's not that easy for a lot of people?
It's my brother. My brother has 2 children. He's 7 years younger than I am, and he has younger children. And the older of his 2 daughters, I didn't realize until later, has dyslexia. And the first thing I remember is when she was born, I took my kids they live about an hour away from us, and my son and daughter and I went to visit her, and we held my daughter loved holding the baby and everything, and we had a good visit, and we went out to the car, and it was right before we got in the car, my daughter threw up. Right. She was incredibly sick, and I thought, do I even tell my brother that this? And we decided not to. But that little baby,
yeah.
She just got her PhD in gravitational physics. She's into black holes, but she could not read. But at the end of 2nd grade, she was reading at a pre-kindergarten level, if that. And it was a long time before anybody put the word dyslexia on it. It was she was in a school where the teachers was ready to say, "You'll read when you're ready," and I think kids often fool teachers because they're smart, they're good at stuff. She's bright and twinkly. She was involved in projects. She was clever at hiding that she couldn't read. She said a page looked like a pulsing mass to her. So when the teacher would say, "Okay, everybody go take a book and sit and read," she said she would just watch the other kids and see when they turned pages, and that's when she would turn a page. When they did group writing projects, she would volunteer to draw the pictures. She was good at visualizing things and so forth. But she couldn't read. And she ended up at this expensive school in New York, Windward, and was there for 3 years. And it was miraculous. I mean, it made it changed her life. She still struggles. Dyslexia is a lifelong thing. And she reads slowly, and it's tiring. But she loves to read, and she's a good writer. And then she does this, whatever this is.
So this is from like her dissertation defense.
I watched her dissertation defense on Zoom, and the minute she was through introducing herself, I was completely lost. And an interesting thing, stick this in, referring to Mark Seidenberg, who I believe has also been on this.
Yes, he has.
On this stage.
Up on the stage, yeah.
I asked Caroline. I said,
This is your niece, Caroline.
This is my niece. I'm sorry. Yes, my niece Caroline. I said, when you look, you look at all these symbols here, are they as challenging to you as words are? And she said, no, mostly not. And she said some of them make sense only as one. It's clear it makes sense only as one thing. She said sometimes in math, it doesn't matter which order you multiply numbers in. She said, but I asked Mark Seidenberg about it too, and Mark Seidenberg, does everybody know?
Cognitive scientist.
Cognitive scientist. And I said she didn't have the same trouble with the mathematical symbols as she does with the alphabet and with words. I said, what do you think of that? And he said he said it's really interesting, isn't it? He said he didn't know, and he said he thinks that one possibility maybe that they just go to different parts of the brain, that there's a different part of the brain that interprets what are clearly mathematical symbols and another part that interprets, who knows. Anyway, he was stumped, so I can't claim to know. But it's interesting to me.
I think it's also, it is true that math follows rules. It's very logical, and the English language isn't so much. That's not the only reason, but that is something to do with it.
Yes, right, exactly. And she said, I can't even spot. She said in calculus, there's certain a certain group of symbols that only make sense as one thing. But I never
got that
calculus, so
yes, that's
I can't even know. I don't even remember what she said.
So you knew that your niece had dyslexia when she was a little girl.
Not until she was probably not until she started at Windward, and I didn't really even know what it was. I wasn't sure that even then exactly what. I think like most people, I thought if you ask people what's just if they don't have it or have no experience, what is it? It's, oh, it's putting letters backwards.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize I didn't realize until I began working on this article. The first thing I did was interview her. I didn't realize how traumatic it had been in her life. She said she basically never slept through the night until she started at Windward. She was full of anxiety. There were parts of her house that she was scared to go into. She would wake up. She was worried that she would stop breathing if she closed her eyes. She would wake up her parents repeatedly during the night. And they finally said, "You can come into our room at night, but you can't wake us up." And they put a sleeping bag at the foot of their bed, and that's where she would be.
And this is anxiety she attributes to her reading
Yes,
problems
and
primarily.
when she went to Windward, as soon as she started at Windward, it all went away. All this stuff just disappeared.
So you start this article that you wrote for the New Yorker in December with the story about your niece. So when did you decide, what's the origin story of this article? When did you decide to write this?
It was just from talking to her, I asked her about it, and I thought, this is interesting. Dyslexia is really interesting. And as you mentioned in your introduction, when I started talking to people, I talked to people in groups of 4 because I play a lot of golf. So anytime I was in a foursome, if someone would say, "What are you working on?" I say, "Oh, I'm working on a piece about dyslexia." And they go, "Oh, I've got this." At least one person always either had it, they had a kid who had it, they had some experience with reading-related learning disability. Invariably, I mean, usually 2, always at least 1. And you can tell. I'm sure you've seen it too. You test it. Everybody knows something about it, and nobody in my generation had a good experience with it.
So one of the things that's delightful about your writing is so much of it does come from little things in your own life, things you encounter, things from your past. So here you've got the story, you've got this niece. When did you sort of decide, like, I'm really going to dig in and write an article about this? This is worth an article. There's something to say here.
I think I worked on it sort of. I'm in my 70s now, so I kind of slowing down. I worked on it over. I didn't spend a whole year on it, but I took a whole year on it.
Plus playing some golf.
Plus doing some other things. But it was talking to my niece, and I asked her. I asked her about. It was when she, what I thought about was when she got her PhD. And I thought, this is so amazing that she did it. And I asked her about it, and I talked about it, and I pitched it to the New Yorker, and it was just seeing what she could do now, what her life was like now, and how horrible it would have been if she hadn't. And I took her and her parents and her sister out to dinner, and we talked about it.
Oh, I see. So you took them out to dinner sort of to talk about this.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Oh, okay.
And I could have talked, but my most recent book is about hearing and hearing loss, and it was hard to hear. It was a restaurant.
That
it's
is
like
a
the worst
problem
place
in restaurants, man.
It was a loud restaurant too, especially now. Restaurants they're all concrete and steel. So
yeah, right. They look good, but you can't hear a word.
She led to people. I mean, so I read the Shaywitzes. I found you. You led me to a number of people that there are plenty of people to talk to.
Right.
And then it happens in New York. There are now, as of 3 years ago. First was 3 years ago. There are 2 schools in the public system in New York that are specifically for kids with reading-related learning disabilities. One's in the South Bronx and one's in Brooklyn. One's in Crown Heights. I mean, they're in real. They're in tough neighborhoods, and the thing that the principal of the Brooklyn school told me was, or the South Bronx school, she told me that when they started, she said there were 10,000 kids in the South Bronx who could have been in the 2nd grade in that school. They have room for 60. The other thing that the principals at both those schools and at Windward also said is the openings that they have in the schools tend to be in the early grade, in 2nd grade, not in 6th grade, because kids, it's like it'll happen. You'll learn to read. Kids get pushed. Nobody freaks out until at least 2nd grade. So
and by then the anxiety is really bad.
Oh yeah, the anxiety and as a result, you see, it's why schools often treat reading disabilities as a discipline problem. It's like this, you're not trying. And an example is my niece's uncle. She has an uncle who clearly has dyslexia. It was never identified or diagnosed or anything. It was always treated as a behavior problem. He dropped out of schools. He was always in trouble. He did well when computers came around. He loved computers. He did really well with them. He wanted to take those courses, and he was prevented by the school. When you do better in English, then we'll let you take these math and science this math and computer courses that you want to take. So rather than letting him do the thing that he could do, and that then he ended up becoming a multimillionaire doing. But instead of letting him do that, they treated him as,
Oh, that's a very common story.
Yeah.
Was it a hard sell to the New Yorker? Like, were they interested in this article?
It's interesting. They were, and it was a matter of how to make it. One thing the editor of the New Yorker doesn't like is stories that are just all about something. And so, from my point of view, it was lucky that it was a good focus that there were these two schools in the New York public system.
Wait, the editor of the New Yorker doesn't like it when things are what?
Just like an all about. Let's just do a story all about.
I see. It has to have there's a hook or reason.
And it's good.
Yeah. All about you could be writing for a long time.
Yeah, right. So it had there's not only this very highly regarded private school that's in New York City. There were also these two public schools, and there was also at that time the mayor of New York had openly talked about his dyslexia, and had was really responsible in many ways for making sure that the first of these schools got started. And as all the people who really made it happen was a small group of women who had kids who with dyslexia or other reading related disabilities who had just never been, they'd just been screwed repeatedly by the New York public school system. And
what's true of these women, and many women I know who advocate for dyslexia, is that the window had passed for their own kids for many of these, but they were doing it on behalf of the other people's children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was true for all of them. Now some of their kids ended up at Windward, but the public schools came along after their kids were too old to benefit from it.
So when did you start to realize, I know you weren't going to do an all about article, but this is such a controversial, such a complicated topic. When did you start to think like, oh, what did I get myself into? Or what?
No, well, that's the lucky thing about writing about knowing only a little bit about lots of things. I didn't realize how right. It's much, I think, in a way, it's just I think it's often easier to write about a complicated topic if you don't know a lot about it to start with. If the difficulty with experts writing for normal people is that they've lost touch with whatever it was that made them interested in the field in the first place. Now they're off. That stuff doesn't interest them anymore. And every time you mention an area or an issue or something like this, they can think of 10 million ramifications.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's more complicated than that. We don't really. So I think in a lot of ways it's helpful not to know too much. You have to know enough.
Yeah.
But in order to be interested in the parts, in order to explain something to people who know nothing about it, it hurts to know too much about it.
Yeah, but with this one, I guess as someone who's now been obsessed with it for 10 years and has decided it's not, I don't know enough yet. But that was one of the reasons why I didn't like being a general sort of assignment writer, because I felt like I never got to be an expert in anything. And I always felt that it is sort of easier to write when you don't know about it. But when you don't know about it, then every sentence is like, is this right? Like, it's intimidating to write about something you don't know much about.
No, it helps. The New Yorker's fact checkers help.
Yeah, you
and
do
know
have
that
a
you have
nice
a
backstop,
backstop,
don't you? Yeah.
And then also, it's an interesting thing in this. The fact checkers never just take a story and show it to the people that it's about. That they really never do that, and you get in trouble if you do that. But the week before, toward the end of the story, the editor of the New Yorker called me.
The big guy, David Remnick.
David Remnick called me up. He has a daughter who has very serious issues. And he said autism, and he said he said, I know from the autism world that there's like a million different things. He said, is there someone you can think of who would read this, who's an expert, and go beyond the fact checker and just
Make sure
read it,
we got this right.
and see if there's anything that would flag. And it was actually somebody you led me to. Now I can't remember who it was who did it. But
I think it was Tim.
Tim Shanahan.
Tim
yeah.
Shanahan. Yeah.
It was incredibly nice, and he did it very, very quickly. And I'm not sure I satisfied every
Every little
comment
thing
made.
he found.
But it was,
yeah.
but it was.
And you'd
was
never
very
had
helpful.
that experience of the
We're never allowed to-
showing the whole
no,
article.
we're
That's
never-
so interesting.
never
So that tells
allowed
you
to.
something about the complexity of this topic,
Right.
or maybe what David Remnick himself knew about it.
Right, or about what he viewed as felt was a parallel topic, where it's incredibly complicated. It's not one thing; it's a lot of different things, and people, shoot each other over it.
Yeah. Was there anything that you did learn about the research that really surprised you? That was like, what were your aha moments along the way?
I was amazed to look back and see how for how many decades, not really almost a century really, that it's been clear that there's a better way to teach people how to read. Maybe more than a century. And yet there's incredible persistence of the wrong way to do it. And one thing that struck me was you and I have talked about this. The scientists who study reading will say, the teachers, they need to cross the campus and come talk to us. But really, it needs to go both ways. There's one of the difficulties with super high level research. They're not necessarily thinking about practical implementation of what.
Yeah.
Seidenberg's an example. He's super interested in this very complicated stuff, but it would be interesting to see him in a classroom of first graders.
Yes. I mean, just because you can think about it doesn't mean you can do it. But we don't need people to be able, we don't need the people who can think about it to be able to do it. But we do need better communication between the two. That was the whole reason Margaret was here to talk about that.
One interesting thing, I talked to a woman at the Bush Institute. In the Bush family, there's also genetic reading difficulties that they don't necessarily talk about, but they've been involved in it. Now I may have forgotten what I was going to say, but it was.
You probably talked to Anne.
I did talk to Anne.
Anne Wicks.
Anyway,
and
she said very interesting.
She said
things.
something. She said very interesting things. Gosh, somewhere in his notes.
Yeah, somewhere. Oh no, I know what she said. She said it's often the states that have had the best luck with implementing better reading programs are ones where they're super centralized. There's a reason it's Mississippi, and there's not a lot of teachers unions, and you can make a decision at the top that covers all the way down. If you look at the fighting in New York, and I don't know what it's like in D.C., but in New York City, there's every possible level of government, and it just changed. Now there's a new mayor who doesn't have dyslexia, and I think he's super supportive, but you never know, and every 2 years it could change, and then even if no matter what the mayor does, it can be different at the state, different with the unions, different from principal to principal to principal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think this is a lot of the reason why the good practices don't get a chance to get institutionalized, and for whatever reason, and I'm still interested in understanding the answer to this question, the things that it takes for the good practices aren't the things that sort of a lot of people are naturally inclined to sort of want to do or think is the right thing to do for kids. So it's sort of like the less effective ways feel more natural and feel more right. The more effective ways, not as much. So those are the ones that need to be, and we institutionalize it. We live in a system that actually doesn't do a good job institutionalizing things, except what we kind of think is right.
No, we think it's like infringing on our liberty. And this is what it was interesting. The faculty at Windward trained the faculty for these new public schools in New York, and when they brought the teachers in, the head of the school at Windward, the fancy, expensive, super expensive private school for kids with dyslexia, said when the teachers came in, they were all, this is going to be so boring. Teaching in this, following this system, this will be terrible. But then when they had kids in over the summer, there was kids that they knew. They were from the Bronx. They were from the schools that they were going to be teaching in, and they saw this transformation where now they're paying attention. They're not, they're not fighting, they're not throwing stuff around. The amazing one at the school in the South Bronx, that the principal told me it was a girl who she had what she described. She couldn't read at all when she came to the school. In class, she would put her head down on the desk and go to sleep. She said it was anxiety-induced narcolepsy, and
Yeah.
but now she can read, and she said the principal said she remembered the day when the first day she read aloud. She was so excited she was shaking.
Oh, yeah. I know those stories. What kind of reaction did you get after the piece was published?
Nobody writes letters anymore. The most mail I've ever gotten a piece was in 1982, a piece I wrote for Harper's called "The Secret Lives of Dentists," and I think I got a letter from every dentist in the United States, and one of them sent me a book of poetry. They sent me, I mean, really, it was like piles of stuff like this. The second most I've ever gotten was from this story by emails, and one of them was from somebody, Amory Lovins, he's an environmental guy. He and I I've basically called him a fraud a couple of times. Anyway, he wrote me a long letter, it was sort of Amory Lovins-ish in that he wanted to talk about what a good reader he had been in school. But it was that kind of thing. I heard from lots of people that I didn't know had difficulties.
Right. People come out of the woodwork.
Just people talk about how hard this had been. I have a lawyer. He's a retired lawyer. He was a big, one of these big fancy lawyers, a big law firm in New York. The boilerplate message at the bottom of his work emails used to say that if every word in his email was spelled correctly, throw it out. It was written by somebody else. So he struggled with dyslexia his whole life. Not as severe as my niece's, but.
When you first reached out to me about interviewing me for your piece, I think it was over the summer, it was when I was on vacation, and like a couple of days later, I got this email from a guy in Australia named Nicholas, and he wrote to me and said that he's 58 years old, and he recently went to see a reading specialist for the first time. He was working as a scientist doing research on a research team, doing like deep research about things that live in the deep sea. And he talked about words were always this huge struggle. And I sent him along to you. He sent me this email because he was so proud. This is a list of the words that he now can spell that he couldn't spell before. So 58 years old, a successful guy, but he had hidden it for his whole life. Here's some of those words. He's spelled a little differently because he's in Australia.
2 hours to get these all in there.
Yeah, is that what he said? Well, you ended up talking to him. I never talked to him.
I talked to him for a long time, and I in an early draft of my piece, I quoted him, but I had too much.
Your bad editor killed it.
My bad editor.
Yeah. We hate those editors who kill our
especially now that they look like 8th graders. They're so young. But anyway, he took him out. But he was super interesting, and he couldn't read at all. And he said the big breakthrough for him in adulthood was that someone explained to him that letters represent sounds, and no one had ever.
I've had this experience too. People are just like, someone just explained that to me. That was such a profound insight.
It's
like the alphabetic
whoa.
principle is profound, and not everyone gets it unless you explain it to them.
It's true, and he said when he was the way he got to his career. He was just describing all these ways he did it. I mean, there were all these accidents that made it possible. One of them was that a test that he took that he didn't. He did terrible on it. He knew it. But then the whole test got thrown out for some completely unrelated reason. It didn't count. It didn't matter. And he had to climb into a building, climb up the side of a building, go in through a window to do something. And he would work. And one of the breakthroughs for him with reading was a girl that he met that he was really interested in, an American exchange student in Australia. When he was, they sat on the beach together and read The Lord of the Rings. She took him through it word by word. But the real breakthroughs I think came later, and he works with somebody now, and he's amazing.
This was how he signed his email to me. Thanks once again, Nicholas, Nicolas. He says, I've been reclaiming my own name. I used to sign Nick instead because his teachers would insist that there was an H in his name, and he didn't have an H in his name. But like this is how profound and how deep to identity. Like he didn't use his real name because he was accused of not knowing how to spell it.
Heartbreaking to think, so many people, how different his life would have been.
Yeah.
How much, as with my niece, how much less anxiety. Sure, she's got a PhD now, but just how much easier it would have been to get to third grade if somebody had noticed something earlier.
Right, and your niece and Nicholas, there's all kinds of stories that don't end as well as theirs do.
No, exactly. And there's, I think maybe you told me about, or no, one of the women from the collective in New York said about the damage done by the stories about people who have dyslexia and do great. And she quoted a kid saying, I can't even be a good dyslexic. I can't even do dyslexia right. But it's an impediment. It's not a strength. And there's so many fraudulent, phony, manipulative, exploitative non-treatments for.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to turn to some questions. Does anyone have a question? There are 2 women in the audience with microphones, so just raise your hand.
I'll ask a question of myself.
Okay.
I always want to tell a story.
Okay.
This is what it's like from hardly anybody here is from as far back in time as I am. But when my wife was in first grade in 1962, her teacher called her mother in for a conference and asked her to discourage my wife from reading outside of class because she was worried that she'd gotten too far ahead of the other kids. And she suggested that she take up spool knitting instead.
This is spool knitting.
This is spool knitting. Just to get the books out of her hands and get her making these endless ropes of yarn. And there, I think there's another kind of problem with teaching, whereas the teacher's goal was to get everybody sort of moving at the same speed.
Same middle, yeah.
So she had to knock off the kids who could read and then just do something, get rid of the kids at the bottom.
Yeah.
And to schools, it can seem like a problem that solves itself because, the kids with the worst problems eventually drop out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Questions or comments?
You're obviously an incredible journalist who can get people's attention with having understood problems that resonate with so many of your readers or open their eyes to problems they may not have known existed. I come from that weird world called academia, and I thought about your comment a couple of minutes ago that there are the specialists who don't seem to know how to sort through, boil down, extract from what they know to be able to have an impact on readers. So the question is, are we miseducating people? So let's go back to the first part of your conversation about becoming a journalist and maybe adding in the question of what should people learn to be able to communicate information and stories, because stories matter, combined with information, so that you can take the people who, in principle, know a lot because they spent years studying it, and add in the skills that you have so that one can get the message through to people to change their minds about such things as pedagogy for kids learning to read.
Yeah, and that's a really tough question. And I once got hired to do a writing workshop for academic writers. It was basically this question. And what they said, we can't do any of the stuff that you do. I mean, you can't, like when you do a scholarly paper, it can't be based on anecdote. I'm all about anecdote. And I think anecdotes are powerful.
Yeah.
And you can't abuse it. I mean, but if you tell us, it's hard to tell a story in a peer-reviewed paper, I would guess. And I don't know that there's any, I don't know what the answer to that is.
Well,
one thing that I would say
yeah.
is that how super powerful a podcast is, especially yours coming, now everybody has a podcast. I mean, everybody here probably does a podcast. But I mean, the power of Sold a Story, the impact of Sold a Story was beyond anything that any article or book that I know of about on this topic could have. I mean, it was just exactly the right medium for it. And that's a hard thing, even harder thing probably to do in academic topics. So, yeah.
Well, I have a thought on that, and then
Okay.
we can follow on that.
Please.
But, I have a thought on your question, which is, I get asked this question a lot too, and brought in to talk to people about how academics and scientists and other kinds of experts can communicate better about their work. And I think that's all very important. But I actually would say this is a good argument for why journalism is important. That's exactly what journalists do, especially those of us who are lucky enough to be able to go in depth on things and write long things, is we do and go try to talk to experts and then communicate that. So I don't think it's everyone's role to do everything. So just the good scientists don't all have to be good communicators, but we do have to support journalism and good journalists who can report on things like science.
I think that's a good answer. I think
Because I've always felt stumped when I get that question.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what advice to give.
Yeah.
I think that's my job.
yeah, I think that is good. I think it helps to have a short attention span. So if you probably don't have your attention span is not as short as mine is, and I was super interested in this topic, and I would be surprised if I write about it again. And I've been interviewed about things before to say, we'd like to have you come on, a radio show and talk about this topic that you've written about so interesting that interested in the other things that you know about it. I said, you don't understand.
That's all I know.
That article contains more than everything I know about it.
Exactly. Yes. So that's why my own career has changed a little bit in being able to do the same thing for 10 years, because now I finally
have a
feel like,
beat.
I do know. Yeah,
Yeah, you
it's
have a
very
beat.
different to have a beat.
It's very important to have, in journalism, to have beat reporters, but it's also limiting because you get, you get connected to people. It becomes,
True.
you
And you have to watch out
they're-
yourself for that curse of the expert thing.
Right.
And I actually feel very grateful that the medium that I have to write in is a podcast, because I actually think that question of how you take a topic and you keep its complexity, but you make it simple, you make it so that the general audience can understand. In podcast writing, even more than in something like The New Yorker, we have to be so careful about never, ever having that urge that I do all the time in The New Yorker, which is I'm reading something, you lose your train of thought or whatever, and then you go back and look, you skip a few. You can't do that. As soon as someone goes back in a podcast, you're usually losing them.
Right.
So we have to just keep you hold your hand every single step of the way. It's were asking me before about the process of writing a podcast script, and you were asking, I thought this was delightful, do you actually write every word, or you just kind of wing it? Oh, we write every single word. Are you kidding? We argue about ands, buts, ors, and all of those things just like you do. But you have to keep people with you all along the way. Yeah.
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 Any other questions or comments? We've got a few more minutes. It looks like there's now a few people. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm one of those moms who has a dyslexic daughter and then became one of those advocates here in DC. And so a lot of these stories resonate for me. My question is, after you wrote the article, if you heard much from policymakers or people who have kind of seen your article and then had a aha moment and are trying to then apply it in school systems and whatnot, if you've gotten much of a response like that.
I don't think I've heard from any policymakers. You probably
I've heard
have.
from a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Mostly the ones that were personal stories, people with some personal connection to it. I'm trying to think, and from I'm sure Emily would have much more of that.
Yeah, I think that I've probably heard from the policymakers just because of the accumulation over the years, and because it ended up getting a lot of particular attention by policymakers. The sort of takeaway, there was a policymaker takeaway, I guess, in it. So it makes more sense that you would get the sort of anecdotal personal stories, but much more of the personal stories. I mean, I'm not hearing from tons of legislators, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot more from people who have personal stories. Those are the people who are compelled to write. And in a few cases, the policymakers I've heard of have a personal story. And that's why they wrote.
But I think also being in the position you're in now, it's easier to be an activist now. I mean, there's enough support. Other people have done it. There are other people doing it. There's sold a story. It's not as weird a topic as it was when I was a kid in school. Mm-hmm. And I think when my wife and I, my parents sent us some furniture when they moved out of the house, and it came in a moving van, and a partial shipment of a moving van, and a couple of pieces got broken, and the moving had to make a claim to the van company, and the guy who drove the truck wrote down it was Smeel Mielt Stand, and we always thought that was so funny, small metal stand.
Oh.
And I only realized when I was working on this, he couldn't. That was as close as he could come, and that seemed really heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah, you do see like little details that you
Oh,
get a new
now
lens
I
on
get
it. That's
now
what
I
it
see.
is.
Now I
Yeah.
understand. Now I understand.
Yeah. Another question?
Hi, I teach adult literacy. I teach adults who have dyslexia and learning disabilities. And I apologize, I haven't read your article. I was invited at the last minute. And
I'll
now
read
I
it
certainly
aloud.
will. No,
It'll take a long
I'm
time.
curious because of the subtitle. Do you list in the article what best practices are? Or are we just assuming that we all know what best practices are? And if not, would you mind just elaborating
Yeah.
on that?
I didn't write the subhead, so
Well, but why? If we know what to do, but we're not doing it, what did you say we should be doing?
Well,
Or is
you
that
ask
not
a
the
very
article?
complex question with just a few minutes left.
Okay, maybe so. That's not what the article was about.
I think Emily's better.
Yeah. No, he does cover some of that in the article for sure. So you should definitely read the article. And I don't know if you've heard the podcast, but the podcast definitely goes into some of this too. So there's a lot for you to read and listen to if you want. There's a lot out there.
No, that's a good answer.
I think we maybe have time for one or two more comments.
I can also think back when you mentioned the smell, the power of smells. That in that article I mentioned, my sister and I went on a smell tour of Kansas City where we grew up, and the idea was to go around and see if places still smelled like the way they did when we were kids. These places that we remembered, and some of them did, and some of them didn't.
Oh, it brought back so many memories of that I have of this store that we used to go to. My brother and I
Right.
got candy, and it smelled like the floor. They
Yeah.
oiled the floor,
Right.
the wood floor
Yep.
with something. I love that. Okay, someone's
Hi.
got.
Okay.
I'm a reading teacher, a reading interventionist for DC Public Schools. I want to first admit that I'm here, so I know that I have a particular enthusiasm for learning more and implementing best practices. But by and large, the teachers I work with are now aware of the research, much thanks to you, Emily, and your work to communicate that. I'm wondering if you guys could talk a little bit more about your conversations with other stakeholders, like the people that make curriculum decisions. In my experience and from my perspective, teachers are mostly just using what they're given because teaching's a really complex job. Of course, it involves making evidence-based instructional decisions, but in a lot of ways, it also involves a lot of other personal care for children that can take the time that's needed to make careful instructional decisions away from teachers. And I think there are people that are tasked with doing that. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about teacher preparation programs, the role of districts. I think there's a lot other stakeholders could be doing. And I agree. I know I'm a realist. I know who I work with by and large. And there are people that want to do better, and there are people that are doing what they've always done. But I just think there might be room to invite other stakeholders into the conversation as we make these shifts.
Yeah, well, I think it's true that the sort of making these kinds of changes and doing it well is very complex. There's a lot of things involved, and teachers just knowing about this isn't enough. There's lots of questions about what they're given and how they're trained, how they were trained before they got to the job, how they're being trained on the job. It is, and to your question earlier, I didn't mean to, I hope we weren't dismissive about your question. It's just that you ask a very big, very important question, which is, what are the best ways to teach reading? How do teachers know about it, learn about it? But then how do you actually make it work in a very, very complex system where there are a lot of things going on? Like there's a lot of teacher turnover. There's a lot of student turnover. There's a lot of superintendent and principal turnover. There's a lot of, like in New York, where this is what we're focusing on, and now 2 years later, someone new's in charge, and now we're focusing on something else. This is we live in teachers teach in a very, very complex system and have very difficult jobs that go way beyond getting some information from an article or a podcast and saying, well, I'm going to do it that way now. It doesn't work that way. And those of us who can come in and tell these stories to, clarify things for people, and I think things like this can help to clarify the problem, but we don't we don't know the solution, partly because that's not what we do or it's not our job, and because that is it's a very complex answer. So Sold a Story Season 2 is coming out in the fall, and it will go into some of that. It probably won't provide, it cannot provide all of the answers. That is, I mean, I think that's getting even to sort of what a journalist does. Like, as I've gotten more to know more about this topic, this is something that I now am thinking about a lot. Like, I realize that a lot of people sort of want answers, from me sometimes. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly what I do. What I do better is like explain things about the research, show people problems that they either knew about and are like, look, see, I've been telling you about this problem, or see a problem, for the first time, or see something in a new way. Like what I was saying when I introduced David, which is like, I think what a writer can do is put words to experiences and things that are happening that allow people to see them as they are, or in a different way that they thought they were. But maybe it's the lamest answer ever, but I don't think a journalist can ever give you the answer.
Well, doesn't it also, people that I talk to too say it has to be top down. There has to be support from above in order for, it's not enough. You could be a teacher and know the perfect way to do it, but if you don't have support from a principal, from a department, from colleagues, from the whole system that works together, and you see it even where the two new schools in New York, where they have lots of support from sort of mayor, at the time, chancellor, principal. They are saddled with a lot of responsibilities that just get in the way. They have to do standardized testing that makes no sense for the kids that they do. Those are state requirements and city requirements. They have all this stuff that takes away instructional time. So even in what's sort of a perfect environment in terms of support all the way up and down, they still have these obstacles. And then if you get into a school where if the principal's not on it, if colleagues are skeptical, if the school board doesn't, so it all has to work together.
And I think it's also always a delicate balance between top down and bottom up. So there was a lot of bottom up, the advocates in the room. Now we're in a moment with a lot of top down, but that can become too much, not the right direction, right? There's unintended consequences. There's always got to be sort of both. And I think that's true of policy making of any kind, especially true in schools. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this series and bringing various people, including Margaret Goldberger, who was here with Reed Lyon, talking very much about this issue of how researchers and teachers talk to each other. And we have an event that's coming up, actually, where we're going to, and I'm going to go back to that, where we're talking on April 25th about turning the science of reading into classroom practice with a woman who's been doing this for years and talking about the importance of language development in particular in reading ability, but is now really trying to take a page from what medicine has become good at, and in some cases not so good at, actually, of translating research into practice. Like, how can we learn from this field called translational science? Like, how do we translate these things? That's a thing in and of itself. So come on April 25th and hear Tiffany Hogan. I think it's time for us to wrap up. I have one last little slide, which is this. What is this?
That's my computer keyboard. I think the other reason that I wanted to become a writer is that I really like to type.
But that is not. But that's your computer keyboard. What is it? I've never seen a keyboard like that. It looks like it could be the Millennium Falcon. You're making.
Well, it's sort of keyboards. It's split keyboards are better because if you just drop your hands on the desk, they're more like this. So a split keyboard lets you put your hands where they naturally would fall. The keys are sculpted.
And it's not in English.
Oh, it is in Elvish. It's for Lord of the Rings keyboard.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah. And I've actually always wanted to ask someone who writes for The New Yorker, why do you spell focused with two S's and traveler with two L's, like
two
the
L's
Brits?
And use the
umlauts or whatever you call it. Yeah. Right. Why do you do that?
I don't know. They've always done it. Some of those things are slipping away. We also used to always spell out every number, and now there's less so.
Well, I did look it up online, and that you guys apparently resisted the like modern American English and Noah Webster's changes to our spelling system and just stayed with the Brits a long time ago, and you're not going back.
And it's interesting too. The New Yorker always says, got, I have got, I had got it, or something like, he had got it, which is the way the Brits say it. But the gotten, say I had gotten it, That's actually older. It was when English came to this continent. People said gotten, and then they lost it in the UK. So the way gotten is actually sort of, if you're trying to be British, we should say gotten in the New Yorker, but it's always got.
Interesting. See, this is why English is such a fascinating, confusing, maddening language. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. Please give David a round of applause. Thanks for your questions.
One more time for Emily Hanford and David Owen. Thank you so much, Emily and David. Thank you for joining us. And also, if you have not done so already, be sure to check out our website, planetwordmuseum.org, and sign up for our newsletter. That way you'll get the latest info and updates on upcoming programs and events right here at Planet Word. Thank you once again. Give yourselves a round of applause and have a fabulous evening.